Story 1. In high school, Jake was the guy. Star quarterback, prom king, and somehow even teachers seemed to bend the rules for him. Every party was at Jake's house, and every party was legendary. One Friday, he decided to throw the biggest bash yet, promising free drinks, a DJ, and, his words, the night of your life. Pretty much the entire school showed up, crammed into his parents' mansion. The night started off great. Music was blasting, people were dancing, and Jake, as always, was in the center of it all, flashing that $1,000,000 smile. But then, halfway through the party, something weird happened. Jake's best friend, Mark, came up looking for his girlfriend, Sophie. She'd vanished. People started checking rooms, bathrooms, the backyard. Nothing. Everyone was starting to panic, but Jake, he just laughed it off, saying, "She's probably fine, dude. Relax." Finally, someone found Sophie locked in one of the upstairs bathrooms, crying her eyes out. When they asked her what happened, she hesitated, then dropped the bombshell. Jake had cornered her, tried to kiss her, and wouldn't take no for an answer. The room fell silent. Jake came upstairs, still acting like the king of the world, until he realized people weren't looking at him with admiration anymore. They were disgusted. Word spread like wildfire, and by Monday, Jake wasn't just unpopular. He was untouchable in the worst way possible. Girls avoided him. Guys who used to call him bro wouldn't even look at him, and teachers weren't so lenient anymore. Turns out, being a creep is the fastest way to tank your social status. Edit. Apparently, Jake tried to spin the whole thing as a misunderstanding, but Sophie wasn't the only one. 2 more girls came forward with similar stories. Jake ended up transferring schools. Good riddance. D. Story 2. I was in college when I met Brad, the guy everyone either wanted to be or wanted to date. He was charming, rich, and threw these insane parties where even professors would somehow show up. No joke, one of our history professors got tipsy on sangria. Brad wasn't just popular, he was untouchable. That is, until the group project incident. We were paired for a marketing class, and Brad showed up to the first meeting late, holding a smoothie and scrolling Instagram. When we started dividing tasks, he waved it off and said, "Don't worry, I'll handle the presentation. You guys do the boring stuff." We weren't thrilled, but hey, he was Brad, so we figured he'd at least deliver something good. The night before the presentation, he sent us the slides. 8 pages, all clip art, spelling errors, and the title literally said, "Marketing is cool." It was so bad, we thought he was joking. He wasn't. During the presentation, he winged it, talked about himself, mispronounced demographics, and somehow tied our project to his yacht. The professor tore it apart and gave us all a C, even though we tried to explain. Brad's reputation? Gone. People started calling him Boat Boy, mocking his laziness, and the worst part? His dad pulled funding for his yacht because if you can't handle school, you can't handle the sea. Brutal. Story 3. Mia was the queen bee of our middle school. She had the best clothes, the coolest hair, and somehow always had the latest phone, even though we were all still stuck with flip phones. Her signature move? Laughing at anyone who wasn't in her inner circle. She ruled with sarcasm and a perfectly arched eyebrow. But one day, her reign crumbled. It started with a math quiz. Mia, sitting smug in the back row, confidently handed her paper to Mr. Hansen. A few minutes later, he called her to the front. "Mia, can we talk about this?" he said, holding her quiz. Turns out, Mia's quiz had a watermark, because she downloaded it from some cheat site. Mr. Hansen wasn't just mad, he was theatrical. He held the paper up in front of the class, pointing to the words, "Not for distribution," stamped across it. Then he gave her a 0 and said, "Cheaters never win, especially in math." The next day, her friends ditched her, and Maya became that kid, the one everyone whispered about. By high school, she was invisible. Who knew algebra could ruin a life? Story 4. Tina was the loudest person in every room, and that's how she stayed on top. If someone else got attention, she'd swoop in, crack a joke, and make sure everyone remembered she was the star. It was annoying, but it worked. Until karaoke night. We were at a friend's party, and Tina grabbed the mic saying, "Prepare to be amazed." She picked a tough song, something by Whitney Houston. The first note? A disaster. She sounded like a screeching cat, but no one wanted to say anything. Then she tripped over the cord, fell into the speakers, and knocked the entire system over. Instead of laughing it off, Tina screamed, "Who put this stupid cord here?" People started whispering, then straight up laughing at her. For the first time, she wasn't the center of attention in a good way. After that, her jokes didn't land, her interruptions got ignored, and people started calling her karaoke queen, but not in a flattering way. Tung. Story 5. In freshman year of college, I met Emily, the sweetest, most popular girl you could imagine. She volunteered, baked cookies for every event, and somehow remembered everyone's name and birthday. People loved her so much, it felt fake, but no one questioned it. Until her roommate found her burn book. Yeah, like the one from Mean Girls. It was a notebook filled with insults about literally everyone she knew. Sam has greasy hair. Lila smells like onions. Even her professors weren't safe. Her roommate shared it with the group chat, and by the next day, Emily's phone blew up with angry texts. She tried to apologize, saying it was just stress relief, but no one bought it. The sweet girl act? Over. She transferred schools a semester later, and now, if someone's being fake nice, we just call them an Emily. Story 6. Sophia was the Instagram queen in our high school. Every post was perfect. Filters on point, captions balanced between sarcastic and deep, and she even had brands sending her free stuff for tagging them. Her followers worshipped her, and she made sure everyone at school knew about it. Sophia was more than popular. She was untouchable. But then came the infamous vacation fiasco. Over spring break, Sophia posted non-stop about her family's exotic trip to the Maldives. Crystal blue waters, fancy resorts, private beaches. It looked like something straight out of a travel magazine. Except one tiny detail didn't add up. She forgot to turn off her Snap Map. People noticed she was still at home. Someone screenshotted it, and within hours everyone knew Sophia hadn't left her living room. Turns out all her pictures were recycled from Pinterest and random Instagram accounts. When she came back to school, it was like the air had been sucked out of her popularity balloon. People started calling her Fake-cation Sophia. Even her sponsors dropped her. Edit. Turns out the brands that had sent her free stuff actually asked for it back. Who knew you could lose clout and merch in 1 week? Story 7. Ethan was the golden boy of our neighborhood. Straight A student, star of the soccer team, and somehow always had time to volunteer. Parents loved him, teachers adored him, and every kid in our grade wanted to be his friend. But Ethan had a secret, one that came crashing down during the championship game. The game was tied, the crowd was on their feet, and Ethan was about to take the final penalty shot. As he stepped up, the referee suddenly blew the whistle and called him over. Confused, we all watched as the ref pointed at Ethan's cleats. They weren't regulation. In fact, they had spikes that gave him an illegal advantage, spikes Ethan had personally added. The ref disqualified him on the spot, and we lost the game. People were furious. His teammates called him a cheater, his coach benched him permanently, and parents stopped inviting him to those fancy neighborhood dinners. By the next week, Ethan went from golden boy to the guy everyone avoided. Story 8. Nina was the drama queen of our class. If there was tea to spill, she'd pour the whole pot, and somehow she always knew everyone's business. She wasn't just popular. She was feared, because no one wanted to be her next target. But Nina had a habit of oversharing, and one day, it bit her back hard. At lunch, she started bragging about how she'd hooked up with this guy from the senior class. She described every detail, loudly. Unfortunately for her, the guy's girlfriend was sitting at the next table. And even more unfortunately, the girlfriend was not one to let things slide. The girl calmly walked up, slammed her tray down and said, "You mean my boyfriend?" The entire cafeteria went silent. Nina stuttered, trying to backtrack, but the damage was done. The girlfriend pulled out her phone and showed receipts, texts, screenshots, and even a picture of Nina sneaking out of the guy's car. By the next day, Nina's reputation was toast. People started calling her Side Dish Nina, and no one trusted her anymore, not even her closest friends. Back. Story 9. Jordan was the class clown, the guy who could make anyone laugh in any situation. Teachers tolerated his jokes because they were mostly harmless, and students loved him because he kept things interesting. But Jordan's need for attention got the better of him during a school assembly. The principal was giving a serious speech about safety protocols, and Jordan thought it'd be hilarious to interrupt. He stood up, yelled, "This is so boring!" and pretended to faint. The crowd laughed, at first. But then the principal called security, thinking it was a real medical emergency. When they figured out it was a prank, things went downhill fast. The principal wasn't amused, and neither were the paramedics who had rushed in to help. Jordan got suspended for 2 weeks, and his parents had to pay a hefty fine for misuse of emergency services. When he came back, no one laughed at his jokes anymore. People started calling him Emergency Jordan, and even the teachers stopped cutting him slack. Story 10. Claire was the ultimate overachiever. Straight A's, president of every club, and somehow still had time to tutor struggling students. She was loved by everyone, or so we thought. Her downfall began during the election for student council president. Claire ran unopposed, which should have made things easy, but she wanted to guarantee a unanimous win. So she did what any perfect student wouldn't. She bribed people. A few bucks here, free snacks there, and suddenly everyone was buzzing about how Claire was buying votes. It might have stayed a rumor, except one guy recorded her handing out cash in exchange for promises to vote. The video hit social media, and by the next day, the principal disqualified her. Claire tried to deny it, but there was no escaping the footage. The worst part? The election was cancelled, and the entire school had to vote again, this time without a president. Claire's reputation as the perfect student crumbled, and by senior year, she was just another name in the crowd. Story 11. Max was the go-to guy in our school for all things cool. He had the best clothes, the flashiest car, and a way of making everyone feel like they were part of his exclusive inner circle. If Max liked you, your social life was set. But Max had one fatal flaw. He couldn't handle losing. During senior year, he decided to run for prom king, confident he'd win by a landslide. His campaign was over the top. Giant posters, free candy for votes, and a cringe-worthy rap performance during lunch. Everyone thought he had it in the bag. But when the results were announced, the title went to Chris, a quiet guy on the swim team who didn't even campaign. Max snapped. He stormed onto the stage, grabbed the mic, and went on a rant about how prom king is rigged and popularity doesn't even matter anymore. The audience was stunned, then started laughing. To make it worse, someone filmed the whole meltdown and posted it online. By the next day, Max wasn't the guy everyone looked up to. He was the guy who couldn't take an L. Edit. Turns out Max tried to appeal the decision to the principal, claiming some kind of vote tampering. The principal just told him, "It's a prom, not an election. Let it go." Story 12. Megan was the artsy, mysterious girl everyone admired from a distance. She had this effortless style, always carrying a sketchbook, and somehow making coffee stains look like part of her aesthetic. People called her the Muse, and she soaked up the attention like a sponge. Then came the spring art competition. Megan entered her best work, a stunning portrait of the town's skyline at sunset. The judges were blown away, and she won first place, earning a cash prize and a feature in the local paper. For a week, she was untouchable. But during the exhibition, someone noticed something strange about her painting. A visitor muttered, "I've seen this before." It didn't take long for the whispers to turn into a full-blown scandal. Turns out, Megan hadn't painted the skyline herself. She traced it from a stock image. Someone found the original online and shared the comparison. The fallout was brutal. Megan lost her prize money, her feature got pulled, and people started calling her Copycat Megan. Her mysterious aura? Completely shattered. Story 13. Ryan was the king of parties. If there was a weekend and you weren't at Ryan's house, you were nobody. He always had the best music, the most insane themes, and somehow managed to convince his parents to stay out of town every time. Everyone wanted to be Ryan's friend, until his infamous end of summer bash. This time, he decided to go big. Rented a bounce house, hired a DJ, and even promised a fireworks display. The party was going great until someone accidentally spilled a drink on the DJ's equipment, causing it to short circuit. Ryan panicked, but instead of handling it like a normal person, he grabbed the mic and started yelling at everyone to pay up for the damage. People laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but Ryan kept going, naming names and accusing people of ruining the vibe. By the end of the night, half the crowd had left, and those who stayed only did so to watch the train wreck. The next day, Ryan tried to brush it off, but his reputation didn't recover. No one wanted to go to his parties anymore. What's a king without a kingdom? Story 14. Ava was the girl everyone wanted to be. She was pretty, smart, and somehow managed to stay friends with every clique in school. She was the ultimate social butterfly, and her popularity seemed untouchable. That is, until she got caught in a lie that no one saw coming. During a history class project, Ava claimed she was related to a famous Civil War general. She brought in photos, old letters, and even managed to convince the teacher to give her extra credit for bringing history to life. People were impressed. Some even joked about asking her to sign autographs. But one day, a classmate who loved genealogy decided to dig a little deeper. They found out the general Ava claimed as her ancestor had no living descendants. When confronted, Ava tried to play it off as a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. By the end of the semester, Ava's popularity had tanked. People started calling her General Ava, but it wasn't a compliment. Story 15. Luke was the ultimate prankster. He had a way of turning the most boring situations into something wild, and people loved him for it. Teachers might have rolled their eyes, but even they secretly found him entertaining. But Luke's love for pranks went too far during a school camping trip. The teachers warned everyone about bears in the area, making sure we followed strict rules about food and trash. Luke, of course, thought this was the perfect opportunity to scare people. Late at night, he snuck out and started growling near the tents, scratching at the fabric and yelling, "It's a bear!" The camp erupted in chaos. People screamed, ran out of their tents, and one kid even climbed a tree. But then, the real twist. Luke's growling attracted an actual bear. The teachers had to call park rangers, and the entire trip was cut short. When we got back to school, Luke's prankster reputation was dead. Everyone blamed him for ruining the trip, and the nickname Bearbait Luke stuck for the rest of the year. Story 16. Olivia was the queen of the debate team, but not in the inspiring, look at her intellect way. No, she was a steamroller. Loud, aggressive, and always convinced she was the smartest person in the room. She won every debate, but it wasn't because of her skill. It was because she intimidated everyone into silence. People admired her confidence, but secretly hated her guts. The big turning point came during the state championship. Olivia was up against a team from another school, and she came in hot, throwing facts, stats, and her signature smug smirk. Everything was going fine until one of the judges interrupted her. "Can you cite your source for that statistic?" the judge asked. Olivia froze. She stammered something about reading it online, but the judge wasn't buying it. They pressed her, and finally, she admitted she'd made it up to strengthen her argument. The room went dead silent. Her teammates looked like they wanted to disappear. The judges disqualified her on the spot, and the other team walked away with the trophy. By the next week, word had spread. Olivia wasn't just the debate queen anymore. She was fact-free Olivia. People started mocking her in class, and her intimidation factor disappeared overnight. Story 17. Tyler was the guy who always had to one-up everyone. If you got a new car, Tyler's was faster. If you aced a test, Tyler barely studied and did better. His stories were wild, so wild they were hard to believe, but no one dared call him out. That changed at the senior talent show. Tyler bragged that he could play the guitar better than anyone in school. He hyped up his performance for weeks, claiming he'd been playing since he was 5 and could even shred like Hendrix. People were genuinely excited. When the night came, Tyler strutted on stage with an electric guitar, gave the audience a wink, and started playing. Or at least he tried to. His fingers fumbled, the notes clashed, and the feedback from the amp was ear-piercing. By the end of the song, half the crowd was covering their ears, and the other half was holding back laughter. Tyler tried to play it off as a joke, saying he'd just learned the song, but no one bought it. His reputation as the guy who's good at everything crumbled. From that day on, people called him Air Guitar Tyler. Don't ask. Story 18. Claire was the girl who had it all. Beauty, brains, and a boyfriend who seemed straight out of a rom-com. She and Ryan were the it couple, and people envied their picture-perfect relationship. But Claire's need to show off eventually backfired in the most public way possible. For their 1-year anniversary, Claire decided to make a big deal out of it. She rented a fancy venue, invited all their friends, and planned to surprise Ryan with a slideshow of their best moments. During the party, the slideshow began, complete with sappy music and captions like, "Forever and always." Halfway through, something went wrong. Instead of a cute photo of them at the beach, a picture popped up of Ryan kissing another girl, Claire's best friend, Emily. The room went dead silent, except for the sound of Claire gasping. Ryan tried to explain, but Claire wasn't having it. She stormed out, and the party ended in chaos. By Monday, everyone knew. Claire and Ryan broke up, Emily lost all her friends, and the anniversary slideshow became a legendary cautionary tale about oversharing. Far. Story 19. Zach was the tech genius of our grade. If your phone broke, Zach could fix it. Need a game hacked? Zach had you covered. Teachers thought he was a sweet, nerdy kid, but the rest of us knew he had a mischievous streak. One prank, though, took things way too far. For April Fool's Day, Zach decided to reprogram the school's bell system. Instead of the usual ding, the bells would play random sounds, air horns, cow moos, and even snippets of meme songs. At first, it was hilarious. Classes started late because no one knew when to move, and even the teachers were laughing. But then the principal walked in during 4th period. He wasn't amused. Turns out, Zach's prank had triggered some kind of security alert because the system flagged it as a malfunction. The school ended up in a lockdown drill for half an hour while administrators tried to figure out what was going on. When they traced it back to Zach, he got suspended for a week and lost his spot in the coding club. His reputation as the fun tech guy was gone, replaced by the kid who broke the school. Story 20. Lila was the theater star of our high school. Every play, every musical, she landed the lead role. Teachers praised her talent, and students admired her confidence. But Lila had a habit of being, well, a diva. She bossed people around, demanded special treatment, and acted like the stage was her personal kingdom. During the spring musical, Lila's behavior hit a new level. She refused to rehearse certain scenes, saying her co-star wasn't on her level. She even threw a tantrum when the director asked her to tone down her performance during a dramatic scene. The final straw came on opening night. Mid-performance, Lila decided to improvise a monologue, adding 5 extra minutes to a scene and completely throwing off the timing. The audience was confused, her co-stars were furious, and the director looked like he wanted to scream. After the show, the cast held a meeting and voted to replace her for the second performance. Lila was livid, but no one cared. By the end of the week, her reputation as the queen of theater was over. Now, she's just Diva Lila. Story 21. Josh was the golden boy of the soccer team. He was the captain, always scored the winning goals, and had colleges lined up to recruit him. He wasn't just popular, he was idolized. But Josh had an ego bigger than the school itself, and that's what took him down. During a game against our school's biggest rival, the match was tied with seconds left. Josh got a breakaway, but instead of passing to his wide-open teammate, he decided to go for a flashy solo shot. He missed. Badly. The crowd went silent, except for the opposing team's cheers as the buzzer went off. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that week, someone posted a video from the game on social media with a caption, "All about Josh, all about the L." It went viral, and the comments were brutal. To make matters worse, his teammates started calling him out for being selfish, saying this wasn't the first time he'd hogged the spotlight. By the next game, Josh wasn't captain anymore, and the offers from colleges started drying up. He went from being the golden boy to just another player on the bench. Story 22. Maddie was the queen of school gossip. If something happened, Maddie knew about it. And usually, everyone else did too by lunchtime. People loved her because she always had the juiciest tea, but they also feared her because no one wanted to end up as her next subject. One day, Maddie overheard a private conversation between two teachers. She didn't catch the full story, but she heard enough to piece together what she thought was a secret romance. By second period, she had spread the rumor to half the school. The problem? It wasn't true. One of the teachers was actually talking about helping the other with their divorce proceedings. When word got back to them, they were furious and went straight to the principal. Maddie got called into the office, and the principal gave her a very public dressing down during an assembly about the dangers of spreading false information. Her reputation tanked. People stopped sharing their secrets with her, and some even started spreading fake rumors about her, just to see how she'd like it. By the end of the year, Maddie wasn't the queen of gossip anymore. She was its biggest victim. Story 23. Derek was the guy who always had a crazy story. Lost in the woods for a night? Derek's done it. Scored backstage passes to a sold-out concert? Of course he did. But his tales were always just a little too wild to believe, and most people figured he was full of it. Still, he was entertaining, so no one really called him out. That is, until the camping trip. A group of us went to a local state park for a weekend getaway, and Derek claimed he'd been there before and knew all the best spots. He insisted on leading the group, saying he could navigate without a map. By nightfall, we were completely lost. We had no signal, no idea where the campsite was, and worst of all, Derek kept insisting he just needed to get his bearings. After hours of wandering, a park ranger found us and led us back. The ranger told us the trail we were on was clearly marked, and getting lost was nearly impossible, if you were actually following it. Turns out, Derek had no idea where we were the whole time. After that, no one trusted his stories anymore. He went from Derek the Adventurer to Detour Derek. Greta. Story 24. Sophia had the perfect life, or at least that's what her social media said. Fancy vacations, designer clothes, and a boyfriend who looked like he walked out of a magazine. Her captions were all about living your best life, and people ate it up. But behind the scenes, things weren't as picture perfect as they seemed. The truth came out at a party. Someone accidentally knocked over Sophia's purse and outspilled the receipt from a rental company. On it, a list of all the props Sophia had been using for her photo shoots, designer handbags, expensive jewelry, and even the car she'd claimed was a gift from her boyfriend. The room went quiet as people pieced it together. Her lavish lifestyle wasn't real. It was all rented for the gram. By Monday, the entire school knew. People unfollowed her in droves, and her nickname changed from Insta Queen to Sophia the Faker. Edit, someone later found out her boyfriend was actually a paid model she hired for photos. That little detail didn't help her case. Story 25. Emma was the smartest kid in school. The one who always had her hand up in class and could ace a test without even studying. She wasn't just top of the class. She was the kind of genius people envied. But Emma's obsession with winning took her down a dark path. During the regional science fair, Emma unveiled her latest project. A groundbreaking experiment that wowed the judges. She won first place and was even featured in the local news. Everyone was in awe until someone noticed something off. Another student, who happened to be on the same online science forum as Emma, realized her project was strikingly similar to one posted months earlier. A little digging revealed Emma had copied the entire thing, down to the smallest detail. When the judges found out, they stripped her of her title, and the news station ran a follow-up story about academic dishonesty. Emma's perfect reputation crumbled overnight. She went from being the smartest kid in school to plagiarist Emma. Even the teachers started giving her side-eye in class. Story 26. Jason was the school's ultimate ladies' man. He had this effortless charm and a way of making every girl feel like she was the only one in the world. People joked that he could flirt his way out of detention, and sometimes he actually did. But Jason's smooth-talking ways hit a wall in the most spectacular fashion during junior prom. He showed up with Chloe, the girl everyone assumed he was dating. They looked perfect together, like a couple straight out of a rom-com. But halfway through the night, another girl, Hannah, stormed up to him and slapped him in front of the entire dance floor. "What happened to our date next week?" she yelled. The room froze. Jason stammered, trying to explain, but before he could finish, a third girl, Mia, stepped forward. "Wait, you're going out with him too?" she asked Hannah. Within minutes, the dance floor turned into a full-blown Jerry Springer episode, with 3 furious girls confronting Jason about his double, or triple, life. By Monday, everyone at school was calling him Three-Timer Jason. His charm didn't work anymore. People just laughed at him when he tried. Story 27. Emily was the golden child of our high school. Straight A's, president of multiple clubs, and a reputation as the nicest, most genuine person ever. Teachers adored her, students respected her, and parents wished their kids could be more like her. But Emily's perfection was just a little too perfect. It started unraveling during a math test. Emily finished early, as usual, and handed in her paper with her signature confident smile. But when the teacher graded it, something didn't add up. Literally. Emily had somehow scored 105% on a test with no extra credit. The teacher decided to dig deeper and found that Emily had been sneaking into classrooms after hours and altering her grades in the system. She'd been doing it for years. When the principal confronted her, she broke down and confessed. By the next day, her golden girl reputation was gone. People stopped calling her perfect and started calling her Hacked GPA Emily. Colleges rescinded her offers, and she ended up transferring schools. Turns out, perfection doesn't come cheap. Yeah. Story 28. Nick was the life of the party, the guy who could turn any dull gathering into an unforgettable night. Everyone loved his jokes, his energy, and his ability to somehow always get free pizza delivered to wherever the party was. But Nick's need for attention took a dark turn during a Halloween bash. That year, he showed up in a costume he claimed would break the internet. He was dressed as one of our teachers, a famously strict, no-nonsense guy who everyone was a little afraid of. The costume itself wasn't the problem. It was the impression. Nick started mimicking the teacher's mannerisms, voice, and even some of his personal quirks, like the way he adjusted his glasses when he was mad. At first, people laughed, but then someone recorded it and uploaded it to social media. The video went viral, not in a good way. The teacher saw it, and he wasn't amused. The next day, Nick was called to the principal's office, and the teacher gave him a verbal lashing in front of the whole class. Nick's popularity took a nosedive. People started calling him Improv Nick, but it wasn't affectionate. Even his jokes didn't land anymore. Yeah. Story 29. Samantha was the Instagram mom of our friend group. She baked cookies for every event, organized birthday surprises, and always seemed to have her life together. People relied on her for everything, and she thrived on being the responsible one. But Sam's downfall came when she bit off more than she could chew, literally. For our school's charity bake sale, Samantha decided to make a batch of the best brownies anyone's ever had. She hyped them up for weeks, promising they'd sell out in minutes. But on the big day, her brownies were weird. They tasted awful, like someone had accidentally added salt instead of sugar. Turns out, Samantha had rushed through the recipe and swapped half the ingredients to save time. When people started complaining, she panicked and blamed the disaster on a bad batch of cocoa. But someone found the recipe she'd used, complete with her crossed-out substitutions, and posted it online. The fallout was instant. Samantha's reputation as the perfect organizer crumbled, and people stopped trusting her with events. By the end of the year, she wasn't Mom Friend Sam anymore, just Salt Brownie Sam. Edit. She later tried to redeem herself with cupcakes for another event, but no one wanted to eat them. Once a salt baker, always a salt baker, they joked. Story 30. Liam was the guy who seemed to have everything figured out. He was the star pitcher on the baseball team, had a part-time job at the coolest coffee shop in town, and somehow still managed to throw legendary house parties. Everyone wanted to be Liam's friend, or at least be invited to one of his parties. But Liam's perfect image cracked during his biggest party of the year. He'd hyped it up for weeks, promising it would be the best night of the decade. People showed up in droves, packing his house to the point where you couldn't move without bumping into someone. Around midnight, someone noticed water dripping from the ceiling. Then the dripping turned into full-on pouring. Liam ran upstairs to find that someone had clogged the bathroom sink, left the water running, and caused a massive flood. The damage was bad, like, call your insurance company, bad. But instead of owning up to it, Liam blamed the mess on his guests, saying, "This wouldn't have happened if people respected my house." The comments spread fast, and by the next day, people were trashing him online, saying he cared more about his carpet than his friends. His parties stopped being fun after that. People started calling him Flood Liam, and his invitation stopped being the hottest ticket in town. Story 31. Sophia was the ultimate it girl. Straight hair that always looked freshly blow-dried, a wardrobe full of designer clothes, and a smile that could charm a whole room. People didn't just want to be friends with Sophia, they wanted to be her. But Sophia had a secret. Her perfect life was built on her ability to borrow and never return. It started small. She'd ask to borrow a friend's sweater or a cute bracelet, promising to bring it back after the weekend. Then, mysteriously, the items would disappear. When people confronted her, she'd play dumb or blame her laundry. The turning point came when Sophia borrowed Emily's necklace, an heirloom that had been in her family for generations. A week went by, then two, and Sophia had excuse after excuse for why she couldn't return it. But at a party, Emily spotted her necklace around another girl's neck. Furious, Emily demanded an explanation, and the girl said she'd bought it from Sophia for $20. By Monday, the whole school knew. Sophia tried to play the victim, saying she needed the money, but no one bought it. Her popularity tanked, and people started calling her Sticky Fingers Sophia. A jug. Story 32. David was the school's math genius, the guy who could solve any problem in seconds and explain it in a way that made you feel dumb for not getting it yourself. Teachers loved him, classmates depended on him, and colleges were already fighting over who'd get him. But David's downfall wasn't academic. It was social. One day, during a heated group project meeting, someone casually mentioned that David had never been to a party. David laughed and said, "Why would I waste time at one of those?" The group went silent, but he didn't stop. He went on a full rant about how parties were for lazy people who peaked in high school. Unfortunately for him, someone recorded the whole thing and posted it on Snapchat. By the next day, the entire school had seen it. People were furious, especially the lazy partygoers he'd insulted. Overnight, David went from being admired to avoided. Even the teachers started distancing themselves. By the end of the semester, he wasn't math genius David anymore, just David the Buzzkill. Story 33. Lexi was the queen of fashion. She had a way of putting together outfits that looked straight off a runway, even if she claimed they were just thrift store finds. People trusted her style so much, they'd ask her to help pick out prom dresses or design costumes for the school play. But Lexi's obsession with staying trendy became her undoing. One day, she showed up wearing a jacket that she claimed was a vintage, one-of-a-kind. Everyone gushed over it, asking where she'd found it, and Lexi spun a tale about discovering it at a secret boutique. The jacket became her signature piece, until someone noticed the tag peeking out from the inside during gym class. It wasn't vintage at all. It was from a clearance rack at a local department store. Someone posted a picture of the tag on Instagram with the caption, "Secret boutique? More like Target clearance aisle." By the end of the week, Lexi was a meme. People stopped trusting her fashion advice, and her reputation as the trendsetter of the school crumbled. They started calling her Label Lexi, and not in a good way. Jank. Story 34. Ryan was the school's class president, star athlete, and all-around golden boy. Everyone loved him, teachers adored him, and he was practically guaranteed a spot at the Ivy League school of his choice. But Ryan had a dark side. He couldn't handle failure. During a student council meeting, Ryan proposed an ambitious plan to renovate the school gym, complete with new equipment and a mural. People were on board, but when the principal explained there wasn't enough funding, Ryan didn't take it well. Instead of accepting it, he decided to raise funds on his own. Ryan started selling tickets to a fake, exclusive event he claimed would feature a local celebrity. People bought in, excited for the chance to meet someone famous, but the night of the event? Nothing. No celebrity, no event, no refunds. When the truth came out, Ryan tried to spin it as a miscommunication, but it was too late. His golden boy image was shattered, and the nickname Refund Ryan followed him everywhere. Story 35. Katie was the star of the drama club, the kind of actor who could bring an audience to tears. Or at least that's what she liked to think. Teachers praised her talent, her classmates envied her roles, and Katie let it go straight to her head. During auditions for the spring play, Katie announced she wouldn't audition because the lead role was obviously hers. The director, unimpressed, insisted she try out like everyone else. Katie stormed out, but still showed up to the first rehearsal, assuming she'd been cast, except she hadn't. The lead went to Sarah, a freshman who nailed her audition. Katie wasn't happy. She spent every rehearsal criticizing Sarah, spreading rumors, and even accidentally misplacing Sarah's script. It all came to a head on opening night. Katie pulled a stunt, locking Sarah in the dressing room right before the show. Luckily, Sarah's understudy noticed and got her out in time. When the cast found out what Katie had done, they reported her to the director, who banned her from future productions. By Monday, Katie wasn't a star anymore. People called her Drama Queen Katie, and not for her acting skills. Edit. Katie tried to join the stage crew the next semester to stay involved, but no one wanted to work with her. Turns out, burning bridges in theater is a one-way ticket to irrelevance. Story 36. Connor was the guy who made everything he touched look effortless. Sports, academics, friendships, it all came naturally to him. People looked up to Connor as the guy who had it all without even trying. But there was one thing Connor wasn't good at: admitting he didn't know something. That weakness led to his biggest downfall. During senior year, Connor was asked to give a speech at the school's annual academic awards banquet. Everyone expected him to kill it, just like he did everything else. But instead of preparing, Connor decided to wing it. He figured his natural charisma would carry him through. It didn't. He started rambling about hard work and perseverance, but halfway through, he forgot the name of the banquet sponsor, a local philanthropist sitting right in the front row. Trying to cover it up, Connor said, "And of course, thanks to, our very generous donors." The philanthropist stood up and corrected him, loudly announcing her own name. The audience erupted into awkward laughter, and Connor froze. The rest of his speech was a train wreck of ums and stammers. By Monday, people were calling him off-the-cuff Connor, and not in a flattering way. His effortless image was replaced with one of arrogance and laziness. Denk. Story 37. Jessica was the kind of girl who seemed perfect at everything. Valedictorian, captain of the swim team, and somehow always managed to show up to class looking like she walked out of a magazine. Everyone assumed she was destined for greatness, but Jessica's ambition turned out to be her downfall. When a prestigious summer internship opened up, Jessica applied immediately. The problem? So did Rachel, another top student who Jessica saw as her biggest competition. Jessica couldn't stand the idea of Rachel getting the spot over her, so she did the unthinkable. She sabotaged Rachel's application. Jessica hacked into Rachel's email. She'd once borrowed her laptop and memorized the password, and sent a fake follow-up to the internship committee, withdrawing Rachel's application. Jessica thought she'd gotten away with it, until Rachel showed up to school one morning with proof. She had an email from the committee asking why she'd withdrawn, along with a screenshot of the fake message. Jessica was exposed. She lost the internship and was suspended for violating the school's code of conduct. By the end of the week, her reputation as Perfect Jessica was replaced with Jessica the Saboteur. Edit. Turns out Jessica's actions didn't just cost her the internship. When colleges heard about the scandal, a few of them rescinded their offers. Karma hit her hard. Story 38. Tyler was the class comedian, the guy who could make everyone laugh even in the most boring situations. Teachers tolerated his antics because they were harmless, and students loved him because he kept things fun. But Tyler's need for attention went too far during the senior prank. The prank was simple. Cover the principal's car with sticky notes. Harmless, right? Tyler decided to take it a step further. He thought it would be hilarious to put a fake parking ticket on the car, signed by the students of class 2024. The problem? He didn't stop there. Tyler also left a note claiming the principal owed the school $500 for unpaid parking fees. It wasn't just a prank, it looked like an official document. When the principal found it, he wasn't amused. He reported it to the district office, who launched an investigation, thinking it was real. When they traced it back to Tyler, he got suspended, and the class prank became a cautionary tale. Tyler's reputation as the funny guy was replaced with Tyler the tryhard. Even his jokes stopped landing after that. Tug. Story 39. Maddie was the queen of TikTok in our school. Her dances went viral, her outfits were trend-setting, and she had more followers than anyone else could dream of. She wasn't just popular, she was a local celebrity. But Maddie's obsession with clout led to her downfall in the most embarrassing way possible. One day, Maddie decided to film a prank video at school. Her plan? Sneak up on Mr. Wilson, our beloved science teacher, and pretend to spill a fake coffee cup on his desk. She thought it would be hilarious and rack up views. Except, the fake coffee wasn't fake. Maddie had accidentally grabbed her real drink, and when she dumped it on Mr. Wilson's desk, it ruined not just his papers, but also his laptop. The room went silent as everyone watched Mr. Wilson's face turn red with anger. The video didn't go viral for the reasons Maddie hoped. Instead, it blew up as TikTok gone wrong, and the comments were brutal. By the next week, Maddie's follower count plummeted, and her reign as the queen of TikTok was over. Dunker. Story 40. Brandon was the star quarterback, the guy who could do no wrong in the eyes of the school. He had a bright smile, a killer arm, and a full scholarship lined up at a top college. Everyone wanted to be Brandon, or be with him. But Brandon had a weakness, his temper. During the championship game, Brandon's team was down by 3 points with seconds left on the clock. He threw a perfect pass to the receiver, who fumbled it. Instead of encouraging his teammate, Brandon exploded. He ripped off his helmet, threw it on the ground, and started yelling at the receiver in front of the entire crowd. The moment was caught on camera and went viral overnight. Colleges that had been eager to recruit him suddenly started backing away, saying they were concerned about his sportsmanship. Even his teammates turned on him, saying his outburst wasn't a one-time thing, it was a pattern. By the end of the season, Brandon wasn't the star anymore. His scholarship offers dried up, and people started calling him Meltdown Brandon. Turns out even the best players can't win when they lose their cool. Story 41. Zoe was the girl who seemed to have it all together. She was funny, confident, and always seemed to be in the middle of every friend group. She had this magnetic energy that made people want to be around her, and she knew it. But Zoe's confidence had a tendency to tip into arrogance, and one day it all came crashing down. For her birthday, Zoe threw what she called the event of the year. She rented out a fancy venue, sent out exclusive invitations, and even hired a photographer to capture the night. But instead of just enjoying her party, Zoe turned it into a competition. She started a roast battle where guests were supposed to poke fun at each other for laughs. At first, it was all in good fun, but Zoe couldn't resist taking it too far. She targeted one of her quieter friends, Becky, making a series of cutting jokes about her clothes, her voice, and even her family. Becky tried to laugh it off, but you could see the hurt in her eyes. Finally, someone stood up and said, "Enough, Zoe! It's not funny anymore." The room went dead silent. Zoe tried to play it off as a joke, but the mood had shifted. People started leaving early, and by Monday, the gossip was everywhere. Zoe wasn't the center of attention anymore. She was the girl who didn't know when to stop. Her magnetic energy became a joke, and people stopped inviting her to things. Birthday Burnout Zoe became her new nickname. Story 42. Liam was the guy everyone turned to when they needed help. He was the reliable friend, the study buddy, and the guy who always had an extra pencil during a test. But Liam's helpful nature wasn't entirely selfless. It came with a need for recognition. During finals week, Liam decided to organize a group study session at the library. He made a big deal out of it, sending texts to half the school and setting up a table with snacks and color-coded notes. People showed up, grateful for his effort, and the session started off well. But halfway through, Liam began lecturing people on how they should be studying. "You're doing it wrong," he told Sarah, grabbing her notebook and rewriting her notes. When Josh asked a question, Liam laughed and said, "You really don't know that?" People started leaving, one by one, until it was just Liam sitting there with his snacks and notes. By the next day, the story had spread, and people began avoiding him during finals. His reputation as the helpful guy morphed into Liam the know-it-all. Story 43. Katie was the undisputed queen of the cheerleading squad. She had the moves, the charisma, and a fierce loyalty to her team, so long as things went her way. But Katie's leadership took a turn when the school decided to host a pep rally competition between the cheerleaders and the dance team. Katie was determined to win, and she made it clear that losing wasn't an option. She started pushing her squad harder than ever, holding extra practices and demanding they try dangerous stunts they hadn't perfected yet. Some of the girls expressed concerns, but Katie brushed them off, saying, "Do you want to win or not?" During the pep rally, the squad attempted one of the risky stunts. It failed spectacularly. One of the girls fell and injured her wrist, and the entire routine fell apart. The crowd was silent, except for the dance team, who went on to win by a landslide. The injured cheerleader told the principal what had happened, and Katie was stripped of her captaincy. By the next week, she wasn't Queen Katie anymore, just the girl who cared more about winning than her team. Story 44. Ethan was the school's resident prankster. His jokes were legendary. Saran wrapping the principal's car, replacing the school's morning announcements with meme clips, and even getting the mascot costume stolen during homecoming week. People loved his antics, but one prank pushed things too far. For April Fool's Day, Ethan decided to prank Mr. Martinez, the notoriously strict chemistry teacher. He replaced the classroom's lab supplies with fake ones, water dyed to look like acid, flour instead of baking soda, and a stack of worksheets that were blank. The prank was supposed to be funny, but it backfired when a student actually needed the real supplies for a project that counted as their final grade. Mr. Martinez was furious and called Ethan out in front of the entire class, saying, "Do you think this is a joke? Because I don't." Ethan apologized, but the damage was done. He got detention for a month, and his reputation as the funny guy turned into Ethan the Annoyance. By the end of the year, people rolled their eyes whenever he tried to make a joke. Dink. Story 45. Amber was the queen of hustle. She ran a successful Etsy shop, organized bake sales, and even managed to flip thrift store finds for extra cash. Everyone admired her drive, until she got caught up in one of the biggest school scandals of the year. Amber decided to start selling custom notes to students who needed help with essays or assignments. For $20, She'd write a personalized paper that was guaranteed to get an A. At first, it was small scale, but word spread quickly, and soon Amber had a full-on side business. Things went smoothly until one of the teachers noticed that 3 students in the same class turned in essays with suspiciously similar phrasing. The teacher investigated and traced it back to Amber. When confronted, Amber confessed, saying, "It's just business." The school didn't see it that way. Amber was suspended for academic dishonesty, and her Etsy shop was shut down. By the end of the month, her nickname went from Amber the Hustler to Amber the Cheat. Edit. She tried to make a comeback by selling study guides instead, but no one trusted her anymore. Turns out, hustling has its limits. Story 46. Chloe was the ultimate trendsetter in our school. If she wore it, said it, or even mentioned it, it became an instant hit. Her Instagram stories were practically a how-to guide on being cool, and everyone followed her lead. But Chloe's obsession with staying ahead of the curve eventually tripped her up. Literally. During Spirit Week, Chloe decided to make a statement by showing up in sky-high platform boots that she claimed were straight from a Milan runway. Everyone was in awe, snapping pictures and complimenting her bold fashion choice. But by third period, things started to go wrong. Walking down the stairs, Chloe slipped. The boots weren't just impractical, they were downright dangerous. She tumbled down a full flight of stairs in front of half the school, landing in a heap at the bottom. Thankfully, she wasn't seriously hurt, but the humiliation was unbearable. Someone filmed the whole thing, and by lunchtime the video was everywhere. The worst part? A few savvy students discovered the boots weren't from Milan. They were a knockoff pair from a clearance site. By Monday, Chloe wasn't the queen of trends anymore, just Tumble Boots Chloe. Content. Story 47. Brandon was the class valedictorian, known for his intelligence and quick wit. He had a habit of correcting people in a way that was just a little too smug, but most people let it slide because, well, he was usually right. But one day, Brandon's arrogance cost him more than just his pride. During a debate competition, Brandon faced off against Sarah, a quieter but equally sharp student. Confident he'd win, Brandon didn't bother preparing. Instead, he relied on his usual charm and quick thinking. But Sarah came armed with well-researched points and facts. When Brandon tried to challenge her on a statistic, Sarah calmly pulled out her source and handed it to the judges. Brandon stuttered, then tried to bluff his way through, saying, "Well, that's outdated data." Sarah didn't miss a beat. "It's from this morning's news," she said, with the tiniest smirk. The audience erupted in laughter. Brandon lost the debate, and worse, his reputation as the smartest guy in school took a major hit. By the next week, people were calling him Bluff Brandon, and Sarah became the new academic star. T. Story 48. Mia was the queen of the theater department, known for her powerful performances and dramatic flair. Every year, she snagged the lead role in the school play, and every year, people flocked to see her. But Mia's ego grew alongside her talent, and one year, it got the better of her. For the spring musical, Mia was cast as the lead, again. But this time, a new freshman, Lily, joined the cast as Mia's understudy. From the start, Mia made Lily's life miserable, constantly criticizing her and refusing to let her rehearse the lead role just in case. Opening night came, and Mia was her usual confident self, until she forgot one of her lines during the biggest scene. The pause stretched on awkwardly, and the audience started murmuring. Panicking, Mia ad-libbed a completely different line, throwing the entire cast off. The director decided to replace her with Lily for the second performance, saying it was for the good of the production. Mia was furious, but the cast was relieved. By the next week, Mia wasn't the queen of the theater anymore, just a diva who couldn't handle the spotlight. Edit. Lily ended up stealing the show, and some people even said her performance was better than Mia's ever was. Karma, right? Dun-tug. Story 49. Ethan was the guy everyone wanted to hang out with. He was funny, laid back, and always had the best stories. But Ethan had a habit of exaggerating, turning small events into epic tales that didn't quite add up. His storytelling finally caught up with him during a camping trip. Ethan had organized the trip, claiming he knew the best hiking trails and campsites. But as soon as we got there, it became clear he had no idea what he was doing. The perfect trail he promised was overgrown and barely passable, and the amazing campsite he raved about was a mosquito-infested swamp. Things got worse when Ethan insisted on building a campfire without following the park's safety guidelines. His fire-making skills turned out to be as fake as his stories, and the fire quickly spread to nearby brush. We had to use half our water supply to put it out, and the park rangers gave us a serious warning. By the end of the trip, no one trusted Ethan's stories anymore. He went from adventurous Ethan to Ethan the Exaggerator. Story 50. Samantha was the queen of the yearbook committee. She had an eye for design and a knack for capturing the best moments, making each yearbook better than the last. But Samantha's need for control took a dark turn during senior year. This year, Samantha decided to include a most memorable section, featuring candid photos of students in their everyday moments. The problem? She didn't ask for permission before using some of the pictures. One photo in particular caused chaos, a shot of Rachel eating a sandwich in the cafeteria with a less than flattering expression. When the yearbooks came out, Rachel was mortified. She confronted Samantha, who brushed it off, saying, "It's funny. People love it." Rachel didn't think so. She took the issue to the principal, and the school decided to recall the yearbooks to replace the photo. Samantha was furious, but the damage was done. Her control over the yearbook committee was stripped, and her reputation as the creative genius of the school was tarnished. By the end of the year, Samantha wasn't yearbook queen anymore, just petty Samantha. Story 51. Tyler was the king of the football team. His throws were perfect, his plays unstoppable, and he had the kind of charisma that made him a natural leader. People worshipped him, and his teammates would have followed him into battle. But Tyler's confidence was also his greatest weakness. During a high-stakes playoff game, the coach called for a simple, foolproof play, a handoff to the running back. But Tyler decided to ignore the call. He waved off his teammates and audibled into a risky pass play, convinced it would make him the hero of the game. The pass was intercepted. The other team ran it back for a touchdown, and Tyler's team lost by 6 points. The locker room after the game was dead silent, except for the coach, who finally exploded, yelling, "You think you're bigger than the team?" Word spread quickly, and Tyler's reputation as the star quarterback started to crumble. By the next week, he wasn't the leader anymore, just Glory Hog Tyler. Story 52. Rachel was the social media queen of our school. Her Instagram stories were flawless, her TikToks went viral, and she somehow always knew the latest trends before anyone else. But Rachel's need for likes and clout eventually backfired in the most humiliating way. For Halloween, Rachel decided to host a costume party. To make it exclusive, she told everyone they needed to dress as a famous celebrity. She spent weeks hyping it up, promising prizes for the best costume and even a celebrity-style red carpet for photo ops. The night of the party, people showed up in amazing costumes. Think pop stars, movie icons, and even a couple of historical figures. But Rachel, in her quest to outshine everyone, had gone as a controversial celebrity who'd recently been cancelled. She thought it would be edgy and attention-grabbing, but instead, it made everyone uncomfortable. By Monday, photos from the party were all over social media, and Rachel's tone-deaf choice became the talk of the school. Her follower count dropped overnight, and people started calling her Cancelled Rachel. Edit. She tried to apologize in a TikTok, but it only made things worse. The comments were relentless, and by the end of the week, she deleted all her accounts. Check. Story 53. Liam was the school's music prodigy. He played piano like a professional, could pick up any instrument and make it sound good, and wrote original songs that had everyone swooning. He was untouchable, until he let his ego get in the way. For the school talent show, Liam announced he'd be debuting a brand new song he'd written. People were excited, expecting another masterpiece. But when the night came, Liam's performance was off. The melody sounded familiar. Too familiar. The next day, someone figured out why. Liam's original song was almost identical to a famous classical piece, with just a few notes rearranged. When confronted, Liam tried to argue it was inspired by the original, but no one bought it. His reputation as a musical genius took a massive hit. People started calling him copycat composer, and even the music teacher stopped praising his work. Story 54. Jessica was the go-to girl for advice. Relationships, fashion, school drama. She always seemed to have the perfect solution for every problem. People trusted her, and she loved being the center of everyone's lives. But Jessica's love of meddling finally caught up with her during prom season. Two of her friends, Claire and Sarah, were both crushing on the same guy, Matt. Jessica, playing matchmaker, told Claire that Matt liked her, and Sarah that Matt liked her too. She figured she could smooth things over later, but the situation exploded when both girls asked Matt to prom, on the same day. Matt, confused and annoyed, said no to both of them. When Claire and Sarah compared notes, they realized Jessica had been feeding them lies. Furious, they confronted her in the middle of the cafeteria, and Jessica's usual calm demeanor crumbled. By the next week, no one was asking Jessica for advice anymore. Her nickname became Messy Jessie, and her meddling days were over. Story 55. Chris was the guy who could charm anyone. Teachers, parents, even the cranky cafeteria staff, everyone loved Chris. He was the kind of guy who could talk his way out of anything, and he knew it. But Chris's smooth-talking ways finally got him into trouble during a school fundraiser. He volunteered to manage the ticket sales for a big charity concert, collecting money and handing out wristbands. At first, everything seemed fine, but when the event rolled around, several students showed up saying their tickets hadn't been registered. The organizers started investigating and found that Chris had been pocketing some of the money and handing out fake wristbands to cover it up. When confronted, Chris tried to charm his way out of it, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the principal wasn't buying it. Chris was suspended, and his reputation as the school's golden boy took a massive hit. By the next month, he wasn't charming Chris anymore, just con artist Chris. Story 56. I worked with this guy, Brad, who thought he was the smartest person in the office. Every meeting, he'd interrupt people, ramble about things no one asked, and end every sentence with, "But you wouldn't get it." One day, he decided to show off during a big client presentation. He brought in a fancy, overcomplicated slideshow that no one had reviewed beforehand. 5 minutes in, the slides froze, and Brad started panicking. Turns out he had no idea how to fix it because he was using some obscure software no one else had heard of. Our manager stepped in and asked if anyone had a backup. Luckily, I'd prepared a simple, clear version of the presentation, just in case. I plugged it in, finished the pitch, and the client was thrilled. Brad spent the rest of the meeting sulking. After that, he stopped interrupting people as much. Funny how a little humility can work wonders. Story 57. There was this girl, Katie, who always had to one-up everyone. Got a new car? Hers was better. Got a good grade? She got an A+. At first it was annoying, but people let it slide. Until the infamous camping trip. We were sitting around the campfire telling scary stories, and Katie started bragging about how she was basically a wilderness expert. She claimed she could identify poisonous plants, track animals, and even build a fire from scratch. The next morning, we woke up to find Katie covered in a rash. She'd accidentally used poison ivy as kindling for her fire. She tried to play it off, but it was obvious she had no idea what she was doing. For the rest of the trip, no one let her forget it. Every time she opened her mouth, someone would ask, "Are you sure you're an expert, Katie?" She hasn't come camping with us since. Story 58. In college, I had this professor who was notoriously strict about deadlines. He'd always say, "No exceptions. If it's late, it's a 0. Then one semester, he got a taste of his own medicine. He assigned a huge project, due by midnight on a Friday. Everyone worked like crazy to finish on time. But when we logged in to submit it, the portal crashed. People panicked, emailing screenshots to prove they had finished before the deadline. The professor's response? You should have submitted it earlier. The next week, we all showed up to class furious. But karma came quickly. The professor walked in, looking stressed, and said he couldn't grade our projects because his laptop crashed. One brave student raised their hand and said, "Should have backed it up earlier." The whole class laughed, and the professor didn't bring up the no exceptions rule again. Chanta. Story 59. At my first job, there was this guy named Trevor who always bragged about how much money he made. "I could quit this job tomorrow and be fine," he'd say, as if anyone asked. One day, Trevor made a huge mistake. He accidentally sent a mass email to the whole company, complaining about how underpaid he was and calling our boss a clueless hack. Within minutes, everyone had read it, including the boss. Trevor got called into HR and came back looking pale. Turns out, he wasn't making as much as he claimed. Worse, the boss forwarded the email to the entire team, with the caption, "Trevor seems to have some thoughts. Let's discuss in the next meeting." He quit the next day. I guess he wasn't as fine as he thought. Story 60. In high school, there was this guy, Dylan, who made it his mission to embarrass the freshman class every year. Pranks, fake rumors, you name it, he did it. Everyone just accepted it as part of his charm. But one year, the freshmen fought back. They banded together and created a fake, anonymous admirer account on social media, pretending to be obsessed with Dylan. At first, he loved it, posting screenshots and bragging about his super fan. Then the messages got weird. They started mentioning things only someone spying on him would know, like what he wore to school that day or what he ordered at lunch. Dylan freaked out and reported it to the principal, who launched an investigation. When the truth came out, Dylan couldn't show his face without someone whispering, "Hey, did your admirer send you another message?" He stopped pranking after that, and the freshmen became legends. Story 61. In high school, there was this girl, Rebecca, who always got her way. She was the principal's favorite, and if she wanted something, it just happened. Rules didn't seem to apply to her. That all changed during Spirit Week. Rebecca wanted to win the Most Spirited award, so she went overboard. We're talking glitter, banners, and bribing freshmen to cheer for her at rallies. On the last day, she arranged for someone to drive their dad's convertible onto the football field during halftime, with her sitting on the hood like a homecoming queen. What Rebecca didn't know was that the grass was soaking wet from the morning rain. The car got stuck, and when the driver tried to move it, the wheels spun mud everywhere, including all over Rebecca. She screamed, jumped off the car, and slipped face first into the mess. The whole school was watching. The Most Spirited award went to a quiet kid named Ben, who had dressed as the school mascot every day without causing chaos. Rebecca didn't show up to school for a week after that. Story 62. My co-worker Dan was the king of excuses. Late to meetings? Traffic was terrible. Missed deadlines? My internet went out. The worst part? He was never held accountable. That is, until the company retreat. We were all supposed to prepare short presentations about our roles. Dan, of course, didn't do his. When it was his turn, he strolled up to the front and started winging it. At first, it sounded convincing, but then he started making up buzzwords like synergistic scalability and next-gen workforce dynamics. Our CEO, a no-nonsense type, interrupted him and said, "Dan, what exactly is it that you do here?" Dan stammered something about team alignment and strategic insights, but it was clear he had no idea. By Monday, Dan was mysteriously pursuing other opportunities. Turns out, if you don't actually do your job, even the best excuses won't save you. Story 63. There was this guy, Mark, in my college friend group who loved being the center of attention. His favorite trick? Exaggerating every story to make himself look good. One night, we were playing poker, and Mark started bragging about how he had hustled a pro player at a casino. He went into this long, dramatic tale about how he'd won thousands of dollars with a straight flush. At first, we were impressed, But then our friend Sarah, who actually knew how to play poker, called him out. She said, "Mark, you can't have a straight flush with two kings in your hand." Mark froze. He tried to backpedal, saying, "Oh, I must have gotten the details wrong." But it was obvious he'd made the whole thing up. From that day on, any time Mark tried to tell a story, someone would chime in. "Are there two kings in this one too?" Eat it. Years later, Mark admitted he'd been lying about a lot of things, not just poker. At least he finally owned up to it, but the two kings joke never died. 10. Story 64. In my freshman dorm, there was this guy, Kevin, who thought he was a genius. He'd constantly lecture people about random facts, correct professors in class, and act like he was above the rest of us. One night, he decided to prove how smart he was by setting up a debate night in the common room. Kevin spent an hour bragging about how he could argue any topic and win. When it was his turn, someone challenged him with, "Convince us why pizza is bad." Kevin smirked and said, "Easy." He launched into a long-winded argument about carbs, societal norms, and the history of bread. At first, we were all listening, but then someone grabbed a slice of pepperoni pizza from the kitchen and started eating it in front of him. Others joined in until Kevin was literally surrounded by people enjoying pizza while he ranted. He stormed out, muttering about how no one respects intellectual debates. After that, Kevin toned down the lectures, and pizza night became a dorm tradition. Story 65. At my old job, we had a monthly award for Employee of the Month. It was mostly symbolic, no bonus or anything, but people still cared about it. One month it went to Sarah, who everyone knew didn't deserve it. She barely showed up on time and spent most of her day on her phone. Turns out, Sarah had been sucking up to our manager, Dave, for weeks. She brought him coffee, complimented his outfits, and laughed at his terrible jokes. When she got the award, people were annoyed but let it go, until the office holiday party. Dave got a little too tipsy and started bragging about how he gave Sarah the award because she knows how to treat management. Unfortunately for him, the whole conversation was overheard by our HR rep, who was standing nearby. By January, Dave was no longer with the company, and Sarah never won another award. Funny how quickly things change when HR gets involved. Story 66. There was this girl, Lindsay, in our friend group who was obsessed with social media. She posted everything, what she ate, where she went, even screenshots of private group chats, with LOL captions. At first it was annoying, but harmless. That changed when she decided to throw a surprise birthday party for one of our friends, Mia. Lindsay planned everything without asking Mia what she wanted. Worse, she live-streamed the entire process, including complaining about how ungrateful Mia was for not being excited enough. The final straw? Lindsay tagged Mia in a post before the party even started, spoiling the surprise. Mia showed up, clearly upset, and told Lindsay she wanted to leave. Lindsay snapped, "I did this for the likes, not for you." Everyone heard it. By the next day, most of us had unfollowed her. Edit. Lindsay posted a tearful apology video, but it was obvious she was more upset about losing followers than losing friends. Story 67. At my first office job, we had a guy named Eric who loved to prank people. At first it was small stuff, sticky notes on desks, swapping sugar for salt in the break room. But then he started messing with important things, like moving people's work files or accidentally unplugging their monitors. One day, he decided to prank the IT guy, James. Eric thought it'd be hilarious to lock James out of his own computer by setting a password. What Eric didn't realize was that James could remotely access any device in the office. Within minutes, James locked Eric's computer, printer, and even his phone. Eric freaked out, begging James to undo it, but James just said, "It's just a prank, bro." The whole office was laughing, and Eric never messed with James or anyone else again. Story 68. Back in high school, our principal, Mr. Carter, was obsessed with rules. He carried a clipboard everywhere, writing down violations, like untucked shirts or being 30 seconds late to class. Most of us just avoided him, but one day he crossed the wrong person. Jake, the class clown. Jake decided to play the long game. Over a few weeks, he created an exact replica of Mr. Carter's clipboard, complete with fake violations. Then, during a school assembly, Jake swapped the clipboards when no one was looking. When Mr. Carter went to read the announcements, he flipped to his notes and found gems like, "Took too long to tie shoes, detention," and used too many ketchup packets at lunch, immediate suspension. The entire school erupted in laughter. Mr. Carter turned bright red, but he couldn't figure out who had done it. Jake confessed years later at our reunion, and even Mr. Carter had to admit it was a good prank. Story 69. My roommate Jenna had a habit of borrowing my stuff without asking. Clothes, makeup, even food. It was like living with a human vacuum cleaner. The worst part? She always acted like she was doing me a favor, saying things like, "I borrowed your dress, but I took a picture for Instagram, so you're welcome." One day, I came home to find her wearing my favorite coat, the one my grandmother had given me. It had a huge tear in the sleeve, and she casually said, "Oh, it snagged on something. You can sew it, right?" I didn't argue. Instead, I went into full petty mode. The next time she had friends over, I walked into the room wearing her favorite shoes and said, "Oh, I figured we were sharing everything now." Her friends laughed, and Jenna turned bright red. She stopped taking my stuff after that. Story 70. There was this guy, Chris, in our college class who acted like he was too cool for everything. He'd skip group projects, blow off assignments, and still brag about how he was acing life without trying. One semester, he decided to take an advanced physics class, claiming he didn't need to study because he was naturally gifted. The first exam rolled around, and Chris walked in 20 minutes late. He sat there confidently for the first 5 minutes, but then his face dropped. He clearly had no idea what he was doing. The professor, who was known for his dry humor, walked by and said, "Chris, are you writing a novel? Because that's not how you solve equations." The whole class laughed, and Chris turned bright red. He dropped the class the next day and stopped bragging after that. Sometimes reality hits hard. Story 71. In my old office, there was a guy named Kyle who loved to send passive-aggressive emails. You know the type. Per my last email, and "just circling back on this for the third time" were his favorites. It was annoying, but no one said anything because he always copied our boss on the emails. One day, Kyle tried his usual move on Rachel, the quietest person on the team. She had missed a deadline due to a family emergency, and instead of being understanding, Kyle sent a scathing email to everyone saying, "Some people need to learn professionalism." Rachel didn't reply right away. Instead, she waited until the next team meeting, pulled out a printed copy of Kyle's email, and calmly said, "Since we're talking about professionalism, I thought I'd share this." She read the entire thing aloud, and by the end, even our boss looked embarrassed. Kyle didn't send another passive-aggressive email after that. Story 72. There was this girl, Ashley, in our sorority who always had to be the center of attention. She'd interrupt conversations, show up late to events so everyone would notice her, and constantly brag about how she held the chapter together. For our charity gala, Ashley volunteered to handle the catering. It sounded like a good idea until the day of the event. She forgot to confirm the order. We had 200 guests and no food. When people started asking questions, Ashley tried to blame the catering company, but one of the girls called them and found out the truth. To cover for herself, Ashley ordered 50 pizzas from a local pizzeria and tried to pass it off as a fun, quirky idea. The next election cycle, Ashley didn't win her usual leadership role. Apparently, quirky doesn't cut it when you leave people hungry. Tumta. Story 73. In college, there was a guy named Matt in my study group who loved to cheat. He'd copy homework, sneak notes into exams, and brag about how easy it was to beat the system. The rest of us were annoyed, but no one wanted to deal with the drama of calling him out. One semester, we had a strict professor who warned us about plagiarism. Matt, as usual, ignored the rules and copied an entire essay from some obscure blog. He thought he was safe because no one reads random blogs. The professor handed back our papers with comments, but Matt's was blank except for one sentence. "Please see me after class." Turns out the professor owned the blog Matt had copied. Matt had to retake the course and stop bragging about his skills after that. Edit. Funny enough, the professor told us later that Matt tried to claim it was a coincidence. Yeah, because writing the exact same essay word for word is totally coincidental. Story 74. At my last job, there was a woman named Karen who always thought she knew better than everyone else. She'd butt into conversations, rewrite people's reports without permission, and say things like, "I'm just trying to help you do it right." One day, Karen decided to fix a project our team had been working on for weeks. She sent an updated version to the client without consulting anyone. The problem? Her changes completely misrepresented the data. When the client called to complain, Karen tried to pin it on me, saying I hadn't explained the data clearly enough. Luckily, I had saved all our email threads, including one where Karen explicitly said, "I'll take care of this." I forwarded the emails to our manager, who forwarded them to the client with a note saying, "We apologize for the misunderstanding." Karen wasn't fired, but she stopped trying to help after that. Story 75. In high school, there was a guy named Nick who was known for being that guy. You know, the one who always had a story about how he was better than everyone else. He claimed he had a black belt, spoke 3 languages, and once met a celebrity who told him he had potential. One day in gym class, Nick challenged the gym teacher to a pull-up contest. The teacher, a former Marine, just smiled and said, "Sure." Nick went first and barely managed 5 shaky pull-ups before dropping to the ground, gasping. The teacher? He cranked out 25 without breaking a sweat. The class erupted in laughter, and Nick muttered something about being tired that day. After that, his stories weren't as convincing. Sometimes, reality checks come in the form of a pull-up bar. Story 76. There was this girl, Claire, in our college group project, who refused to do any work. Every time we asked her to contribute, she'd have some excuse. "Oh, I'm swamped with my other classes," or "I'm really not good at that part." Eventually, it was clear she planned to coast, while we did all the heavy lifting. When presentation day came, we decided to let Claire take the lead. We gave her minimal notes and told her to just wing it. She confidently walked up, started talking, and completely blanked halfway through. The rest of us just stood there, watching her panic. The professor raised an eyebrow and said, "Didn't anyone review this beforehand?" I replied, "We trusted Claire to handle it." She stammered through the rest, and after class, she accused us of sabotaging her. We reminded her that sabotage requires someone to actually participate. She didn't show up to the next group meeting. Story 77. In high school, we had a guy named Brandon who thought he was a tech genius. He'd brag about hacking into systems, fixing impossible issues, and knowing more than the school's IT staff. One day, he decided to prove it by hacking into the school's Wi-Fi network to change his grades. Brandon succeeded. Sort of. He changed one of his test scores from a C to an A, but didn't realize the system logged every single edit, along with the device ID. By the end of the day, the principal called him to the office. The best part? Brandon tried to act shocked and said, "It must have been a virus." The principal wasn't buying it. Brandon was suspended for a week, and when he came back, people started calling him A+ hacker. Story 78. There was this guy, Jeff, at my first job who thought he was irreplaceable. He'd brag about how the company would fall apart without him and constantly remind everyone of his unique skills. One day, Jeff decided to demand a raise during a team meeting. He stood up, crossed his arms, and said, "If I don't get a 20% raise, I'm leaving. Let's see how you survive without me." Our manager calmly replied, "Okay, when's your last day?" Jeff froze. He clearly didn't expect anyone to call his bluff. He mumbled something about giving it more thought and sat back down. A week later, the company announced they'd automated half of Jeff's tasks. He quit soon after. Turns out, no one is truly irreplaceable. Thursday 79. My roommate, Sarah, was the queen of double standards. She'd lecture me about keeping the apartment clean, but leave her dirty dishes piled up for days. She'd borrow my clothes without asking, but flip out if I touched her stuff. One weekend, she had a date and wanted to wear one of my sweaters. I told her no, since she'd already stretched out 2 of my shirts. She threw a tantrum saying I was being selfish. While she was out, I decided to clean the apartment, her way. I put all her clutter into one giant pile on her bed. Laundry, makeup, dirty mugs, it all went there. When she came home, she freaked out, yelling, "Why would you do this?" I just smiled and said, "I thought you'd appreciate the organization." She moved out 2 months later. Best decision ever. Story 80. In college, we had a guy named Tyler who was infamous for mooching off everyone. Forgot his wallet at lunch. "Can you cover me?" Needed a ride somewhere? "I'll pay for gas next time." Spoiler, there was never a next time. One day, Tyler's luck ran out. A bunch of us went to a concert and he conveniently forgot his ticket money. We decided to teach him a lesson. We bought him a ticket, in the worst seat possible, far from the group. When we got to the venue, Tyler was confused and asked, "Why aren't we sitting together?" Someone replied, "Oh, we thought you'd want the best deal, since you're so good at saving money." He sulked the entire night, and after that he magically remembered his wallet for everything. Edit. Tyler later tried to claim we were too harsh, but honestly, no one felt bad, especially the people he'd mooched off for years. Sometimes tough love is the only way people learn. Story 81. There was this guy, Alex, in my high school debate team who thought he was a natural-born leader. He'd constantly interrupt others during practice, criticize our ideas, and make sure everyone knew he was the star of the team. During one competition, Alex decided to go off script during his speech to improvise a stronger argument. The problem? He completely misunderstood the topic. Instead of debating healthcare reform, he went on a 5-minute rant about fast food prices. The judges were stunned, our opponents were laughing, and our coach looked ready to quit. Afterward, Alex tried to blame us, saying, "You guys gave me bad notes." Our coach replied, "Alex, you wrote your own speech." We didn't win that competition, but we did win the next one, with Alex on the bench. Story 82. At my first internship, there was a guy named Ethan who always acted like he was doing everyone a favor just by showing up. He'd roll in late, half-heartedly complete tasks, and complain about how entry-level work is beneath me. One day, our boss gave Ethan a simple task: organize a spreadsheet for an upcoming presentation. Ethan, thinking it was too boring, decided to make it fun by color-coding it with random colors and adding emojis to every category. The boss was furious when she opened it during the actual presentation. The investors spent more time laughing at the ridiculous formatting than paying attention to the numbers. Ethan tried to explain it as thinking outside the box, but our boss shut him down with, "Next time, think inside the box, and stay there." Ethan wasn't asked back for the next semester. Story 83. In college, there was this girl, Katie, who always made herself the center of attention in group projects. She'd take credit for every idea, complain about how much work she was doing, and act like she was the only reason we'd pass. One semester, we were assigned a major group project worth 50% of our grade. Katie volunteered to handle the presentation slides, saying, "Don't worry, I'll make them amazing." The night before the presentation, she sent us the slides, and they were blank. She forgot to actually make them. We stayed up all night scrambling to fix it, and when we confronted Katie, she said, "I was busy. You should have reminded me." During the presentation, we made her stand in front of the class with the one slide she had prepared, the title page. The professor gave her the lowest grade in the group, and for once, Katie didn't argue. Thanked. Story 84. My old roommate, Ben, was the king of bad ideas. One summer, he decided he was going to become a grill master and bought a cheap grill off Craigslist. The problem? We lived in a tiny apartment with no backyard. Ben set up the grill on our balcony and fired it up. Within minutes, smoke was pouring into our neighbors' windows, and someone called the fire department. When the firefighters showed up, Ben tried to convince them it was totally safe because he'd read an article online. They shut him down immediately and gave him a fine for violating building codes. He spent the rest of the summer complaining about how nobody respects innovation. Edit, Ben later tried to sell the grill back on Craigslist, but no one bought it. Shocking. Story 85. At my office, there was a guy named Greg who was obsessed with cutting corners. He'd always say, "Why do the hard way when there's an easier way?" The problem? His easier way usually made things worse. One day, Greg decided to streamline the payroll system by deleting what he thought were unnecessary files. Turns out those files were critical backups. The next payday, half the office didn't get paid. When HR confronted him, Greg shrugged and said, "It's not my fault. They should have told me those files were important." Needless to say, Greg didn't last much longer. The company fixed the system, and the new rule became, no one lets Greg near anything important. Sometimes cutting corners cuts your career instead. Story 86. In high school, there was this guy, Ryan, who thought he was the ultimate prankster. He'd pull stupid stunts like filling lockers with balloons or putting ketchup packets under toilet seats. Everyone laughed it off because they weren't that bad, until he decided to prank the school assembly. During a pep rally, Ryan thought it would be hilarious to rig the microphone to play sound effects. He connected his phone to the system and started blasting fart noises every time the principal spoke. At first, people laughed, but it got old fast, especially when the principal's mic stopped working altogether. Ryan's big mistake? He forgot to put his phone on silent. Halfway through, his mom called, and her caller ID popped up on the connected screen. The entire gym burst into laughter. The principal just stared at Ryan and said, "Office, now." He spent the next week cleaning the gym as punishment. Dark. Story 87. At my first job, there was a woman named Donna who always had to be right. It didn't matter if she actually knew what she was talking about. She'd argue with you until you gave up. One day, during a team meeting, Donna insisted that a specific client preferred emails over phone calls. Our manager, tired of Donna's constant interruptions, asked her to prove it. Donna confidently replied, "I'll send them an email right now, and they'll respond immediately." She fired off the email, and we all sat there awkwardly waiting. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Nothing. Finally, our manager called the client to clarify. Turns out the client hated emails and specifically requested phone calls. Donna tried to laugh it off, saying, "Well, maybe they changed their preferences." The manager just sighed and said, "Donna, maybe you should change yours too." She didn't speak up as much after that. Tsa. Story 88. In college, there was this guy named Jason who thought he was the life of every party. He'd show up uninvited, drink everyone else's booze, and tell the same 3 stories about how wild he was in high school. One night, he took things too far. At a house party, Jason decided it would be funny to jump into the pool fully clothed. What he didn't realize was that the pool cover was still on. He landed hard, got tangled in the cover, and started flailing around. People had to pull him out before he hurt himself. Instead of being embarrassed, Jason stood there soaking wet and said, "At least I got everyone's attention." Someone yelled back, "Yeah, but not in a good way." After that, Jason's party invites dried up. Literally. Yeah. Story 89. There was this girl, Megan, in my study group who was obsessed with looking smart. She'd throw out random facts during meetings, use big words unnecessarily, and always correct people, even when she was wrong. One day, during a group presentation, Megan insisted on handling the Q&A session because she thought she'd represent the group better. When someone asked a technical question, Megan tried to bluff her way through it, using a lot of buzzwords that didn't actually make sense. The professor raised his hand and said, "Megan, that's not correct. Would anyone else from the group like to answer?" I stepped up, gave the correct answer, and the professor nodded approvingly. Megan glared at me for the rest of the class, but the group agreed she'd brought it on herself. Edit. Megan later tried to claim the professor was out to get her. We all just nodded and let her believe it. Story 90. At my last job, there was a guy named Paul who always had to show off during meetings. He'd use complicated jargon to sound smart and throw in random facts to derail the conversation. One time, during a meeting about budgeting, Paul started talking about the history of currency for no reason. Our boss, clearly annoyed, interrupted and said, "Paul, how is this relevant?" Paul, thinking he was clever, replied, "I believe context is important for understanding the big picture." The boss just stared at him and said, "I believe staying on topic is important for keeping your job." Paul went quiet after that, and meetings suddenly got a lot shorter. Sometimes, silence is golden. Story 91. In high school, there was this girl, Olivia, who loved to spread rumors. She'd twist the smallest details into elaborate stories and then act surprised when people got upset. One day, she targeted my friend Emily, claiming Emily had cheated on a test. The problem? Emily was the teacher's aide for that class, and her cheat sheet was literally the answer key she was supposed to use for grading. Olivia's rumor spread fast, and soon Emily was getting side-eye from everyone. Emily decided to handle it with style. She printed out the grading key, highlighted her name at the top, and taped it to her locker with a sign that said, "Olivia's source." The whole school laughed, and Olivia tried to claim she misheard the story. After that, people stopped believing Olivia's rumors. Story 92. At my office, there was this guy, Marcus, who always tried to act like the boss. He'd assign people tasks, critique their work, and even make executive decisions without consulting anyone. One day, he decided to reorganize the storage room, claiming it would improve efficiency. What he actually did was move everything into random boxes without labeling them. When the actual boss came in and asked why no one could find anything, Marcus proudly announced, "I streamlined the system." The boss looked at him and said, "You streamlined us into chaos. Fix it." Marcus spent the next 2 days putting everything back while the rest of us watched. Efficiency indeed. Story 93. There was this guy, Greg, in my college dorm who loved to brag about his cooking skills. He'd constantly complain about how no one here knows how to make real food and claimed he could teach Gordon Ramsay a thing or two. One night, he decided to make spaghetti for the whole floor. We were impressed, until we realized he had no idea how to boil water. He filled a pot, dumped in the pasta, and turned the stove on high without waiting for the water to boil. The noodles turned into a sticky, half-cooked mess. Greg tried to salvage it by dumping a jar of cold marinara sauce on top, but it didn't help. Someone took one bite and said, "Is this your signature dish?" Greg never cooked for us again, but he kept bragging about his skills. Some people never learn. Tratto. Story 94. In high school, our math teacher, Mr. Bradley, was notorious for his tough grading. He'd always say, "I don't give out A's, they're earned." One semester, a kid named Tyler decided he was going to beat the system by finding the answer key for our upcoming test. Tyler managed to get his hands on a copy, but there was one problem. Mr. Bradley had intentionally planted a fake key. Tyler memorized all the wrong answers and confidently handed in his test. When he got it back, it was covered in red ink with a big, sarcastic, "Nice try" written at the top. The rest of us couldn't stop laughing, and Tyler had to retake the class the next semester. Edit. Years later, I ran into Mr. Bradley, and he admitted he'd been doing that for years just to catch cheaters. Tyler was apparently the third person to fall for it that year. Story 95. At my last job, there was a woman named Linda who always took credit for group projects. She'd swoop in at the last minute, change a few minor details, and then act like she'd done all the work. One quarter, our team worked on a massive client pitch. Linda, as usual, barely contributed, but made sure to sit front and center during the final presentation. The client loved our work and gave us the deal. But when the CEO congratulated the team, Linda chimed in with, "It was all about my final touch." Our manager, fed up, smiled and said, "Actually, The client specifically mentioned the section Sarah wrote. Maybe she should take the lead next time. Linda went quiet, and for once she didn't try to take the credit. After that, she stopped showing up to team meetings. No one missed her. Story 96. In high school, there was this guy, James, who thought he was God's gift to basketball. He wasn't bad, but he had this habit of hogging the ball and blaming everyone else when the team lost. During a big game, James decided to take charge and ignored every play the coach called. By halftime, we were down by 20 points, and James was furious, yelling at everyone for not keeping up. The coach finally had enough and benched him for the second half. With James off the court, the team started passing more and working together. We made a huge comeback and won in the last minute. James tried to join in the celebration, but the coach just said, "Funny how teamwork works, huh?" He didn't hog the ball as much after that. Doubt. Story 97. At my first office job, we had this guy, Tom, who thought he was a comedian. He'd crack jokes during meetings, email memes to the whole team, and interrupt people with sarcastic comments. Most of the time, it was harmless, until the company's VP came for a surprise visit. During the VP's presentation, Tom decided it was the perfect time to make a joke about how management doesn't even know what we do down here. The room went silent. The VP smiled politely and said, "Oh, I know exactly what you do. Let's review your recent performance reports after this." Tom's face turned pale, and he didn't say another word for the rest of the meeting. The next day, he sent an email apologizing for being too casual. Meetings were much quieter after that. So, Story 98. In college, there was this girl, Haley, who always volunteered to lead group projects, but never actually did anything. She'd delegate all the work, take the credit, and then complain if the grade wasn't perfect. One semester, we decided to test her. We let Haley lead a project and gave her complete control of the final submission. The night before it was due, she sent us a draft that was a total mess. Typos, missing data, and random emojis in the text. Instead of fixing it, we submitted it as is. When the professor handed back our graded papers, Haley freaked out over the D we received. We just said, "Well, you were the leader, right?" She didn't volunteer for any more projects after that. Chunked. Story 99. At my last job, there was a guy named Eric who loved to brag about his connections. Every time someone mentioned the problem, he'd say, "I know a guy who can fix that." One day, the office printer broke, and Eric insisted he had a friend who could fix it for free. The boss agreed, and Eric's friend came in with a toolbox that looked like it hadn't been used since the 80s. The guy fiddled with the printer for an hour before saying, "Yeah, you're gonna need a new one." The boss wasn't impressed and asked Eric to handle the replacement cost since it was his idea. Eric stammered something about being misunderstood and never mentioned his connections again. Edit. Turns out the friend was just Eric's cousin, who had zero experience with printers. We found out when the boss Googled the repair guy's name and found a landscaping business. Story 100. In high school, there was a girl named Rachel who loved to play the victim. Anytime something didn't go her way, she'd cry and make it everyone else's problem. One year, during student council elections, she ran for president and was confident she'd win. Rachel spent weeks plastering the school with posters that said, "Rachel cares about you." But on election day, the entire student body voted for a quiet, no-nonsense guy named Mark. Rachel threw a fit accusing people of sabotaging her campaign. The truth came out when the student council advisor revealed that Rachel hadn't turned in her application form on time. She wasn't even eligible to run. She tried to blame it on the advisor, but no one bought it. Mark ended up being one of the best presidents we ever had, and Rachel stopped running for anything after that. Story 101. In college, there was this guy, Liam, who always acted like he was the smartest person in the room. He'd correct professors during lectures, argue over grades, and roll his eyes whenever someone else asked the question. One semester, Liam decided to take an advanced philosophy class. He spent every session debating the professor, interrupting discussions, and monopolizing the conversation. The breaking point came when he turned in a 10-page essay arguing that morality doesn't exist. The professor returned the paper with one comment. If morality doesn't exist, does that make this a bad grade? And gave him a D. Liam tried to argue his case, but the professor shut him down with, "If there's no right or wrong, I can't be wrong for failing you." Liam never challenged that professor again. Story 102. At my last job, there was a woman named Karen who thrived on workplace drama. She'd eavesdrop on conversations, spread rumors, and always insert herself into conflicts. One day, Karen overheard me and another coworker joking about how messy the break room was and decided to twist our words. By lunchtime, the whole office was buzzing about how we insulted the cleaning staff. Karen acted outraged, saying, "I just think it's so disrespectful." The problem? She didn't realize one of the cleaners was standing right behind her. The cleaner interrupted, saying, "Actually, they thanked me for cleaning up the coffee spill you left yesterday." Karen turned bright red and mumbled something about misunderstandings. After that, people stopped trusting anything Karen said. Story 103. In high school, there was this girl, Abby, who was obsessed with winning every academic award. She'd stay late after class, butter up teachers, and even offer to tutor classmates to help them. But really, it was just so she could sabotage their grades. One year, Abby volunteered to run the science fair, a big event that determined scholarship awards. She was in charge of organizing entries, and somehow, her biggest competitor's project went missing. Abby claimed it was an accident, but no one believed her. The judges found out when one of the competitors submitted screenshots of their emails with Abby, showing her repeatedly losing track of their project. Abby was disqualified, and her name wasn't even mentioned during the awards ceremony. She sat in the audience, fuming, while the person she tried to sabotage won first place. Story 104. At my old office, we had a coworker named Rob who loved to give unsolicited advice. Didn't matter if you were an expert. Rob would swoop in with, "Have you tried doing it this way?" Or, "Back in my last job, we always..." One day, Rob decided to help our IT guy, Mike, during a system update. Mike repeatedly told him to leave it alone, but Rob insisted he knew a faster way and started pressing random buttons. Within minutes, the entire office Wi-Fi went down. Rob tried to explain it as a minor glitch, but Mike just stared at him and said, "You broke it. Fix it." Rob spent the rest of the day trying to troubleshoot, while Mike sat back and drank coffee. After that, Rob's advice was limited to talking about the weather. Story 105. In college, there was this guy, Nate, who was a serial dater. He'd bounce from girl to girl, always making grand romantic gestures to win them over, only to disappear a week later. One time, he started dating a girl named Emma, who wasn't the type to take nonsense. After a week of Nate's usual routine, flowers, poetry, and promises of forever, Emma started noticing he was pulling away. Instead of confronting him, she decided to have a little fun. She told all of Nate's exes what he was doing, and they teamed up to prank him. At a big party, all of his exes showed up wearing shirts that said, "Nate's ex no 1, Nate's ex and 2, and so on. Emma wore future ex 7. Nate spent the entire night avoiding them, but every time he turned a corner, another ex popped up. Edit. Nate transferred schools the next semester, claiming the dating pool here was too small. Emma said it was the best party she'd ever been to.